Hello, I'm Russ Joy, and I led Sanctuary's trip. Sanctuary is our young adult ministry here at Black Rock Church. I led our missions trip to the Dominican Republic this year, which was the end of May, early June. The most impactful part of the trip for my whole team was that we ended up being in the Dominican on a national holiday, which we've never had happen before. So usually when we're going around doing our street evangelism, we're only interacting with women because all the men are away at work. But on this particular trip with the day off, all the men had the day off of work. So we saw a lot of guys out and about. We met this one woman named Katia who expressed how she's been a believer her whole life. They had 2 boys, and she was considering leaving her husband because he wouldn't come to church anymore and he wasn't a believer. He ended up coming back to the house after being out for a little bit when we were talking to his wife. And his name was Philemon. And Philemon knew the Bible. He quoted a whole bunch of different parts from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And he brought up some really interesting points that we had heard reiterated with different people that we met throughout our time just doing street evangelism. He wanted to know how the God of the Bible of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob was the same God of Haiti, which was the same God of the U.S., because it seems like he's not. Obviously, to him, the God of the U.S. answers prayers because look at us here. And he said, but my people in Haiti, how is that the same God? Because he's not answering the prayers like he does for the people in the U.S. And so we had this really great, long theological discussion. And what ended up happening was at the end of the time, where we felt like it was a pretty successful ministry time, invited him to come to church in a few hours to come to our camp. We're putting on a kids camp. And this guy hadn't been to church in years. And then a few hours later, we're at the church hanging out, getting ready for our kids camp. And who shows up but Philemon, Katia, and their 2 kids. And they showed up in matching outfits. They really dressed to impress. And surprisingly, it wasn't that they just came for the kids, but Philemon himself, he did the craft. And he was very intent on doing the coloring sheet, which had the verse about the lost sheep in French on the bottom for him to be able to read and understand. And so that was a huge moment for us as a team to see that God works in these people that feel far from God, even people who knew God, knew him well, know the Bible, but are struggling with doubt because of their personal experiences, and that he still shows up for them there just the same way that he shows up in people's lives here. Like, we all have that lost sheep story, so it's pretty cool to see it not just at home, but in the DR as well. On a personal level, the thing that I learned from this trip in particular was the difficulty of having tough theological conversations through a translator. Our translator, Rudy, incredible. Way smarter than me, just so talented at being able to communicate the gospel. But just being able to speak the heart language to the people that we're reaching was just a huge desire that's grown in my heart from having this conversation with people like Philemon. Because I was like, man, if I could just take this guy off to the side and just tell him how proud of him I am, myself, and not have to go through somebody else, I just wanted to encourage him myself and be able to tell him what I think God is speaking to him in that moment through me. And having an extra layer to have to go through to tell him how I feel and how I feel like God feels about him, it just felt like an extra barrier of entry that I don't actually need. If I cared this much about the people like I say I have the past couple of years from going there, then I should take some time to learn the language to speak to them. As our team as a whole, I think that the lesson that we took away this time was the value in preparation for something like a little skit, putting on just the story of creation, the story of Jonah, the story of the lost sheep, and then Jesus walking on water. The little bit of effort that we can put in to take things to another level, not just reading off the sheets, the lines, but like acting in a really silly way to make the kids laugh, those are going to be the memorable moments that they'll remember. A bunch of foreigners acting completely crazy, and they'll remember that for the rest of their life. I think that the Holy Spirit will use those memories to bring back the message of the gospel that they may have forgotten, even when they remember the funny moment. So I think all of us took away that from this last week as well.
Are you ready?